The capital of Alagasia was actually not far off from the main character's small village. If one galloped non-stop on horseback, one could reach that small village in about 10 hours. In reality, this so-called country was extremely small. At the very least, it was far from comparable to the national size of China in ancient times. If they were to be compared, calling it a prefecture was already being very generous. This country should instead be compared to the national size of medieval European countries, and it would be the size of a duchy even then. The sky stick was countless times faster than a horse. Within less than an hour, everyone had reached the capital from the village. It was an imposing city built against a mountain. Although the main buildings of the city weren't too big, several villages existed at its periphery. These villages also weren't too large, but it looked like they still had a large population when put together. Adding together the villages, the markets outside the villages, as well as the people and army troops in the capital, there should be over 50,000 people. But this location is nicely concentrated. One shot of the magic cannon will definitely destroy everything. Wang Xia sat on the sky stick, saying as he looked down at the ground from the sky. Zheng sighed. We don't need to do it so soon. The young dragon there hasn't matured yet. As soon as we finish the mission, we'll return to God's realm and our most important goal in this movie world will no longer be achieved. Since we've already decided to start the whole plot ourselves, then we'll handle the mission by not chasing down and killing those who leave the capital. We don't actually need to kill that many people. At the very least, we don't need to kill indiscriminately to handle it. If it's just destroying the capital, we have many ways to do it. For example, Imhotep, you can do it yourself alone. It's just that you'll need to spend some time on it. Imhotep, however, had a complicated expression on his face as he looked at the royal palace below. After a long time, he spoke, it's not that simple. I can sense some things inside that seem to be stronger than me also, it's a forested, mountainous, and snowy area my magic can't be displayed to its fullest here. I don't know if I could destroy it alone. Hearing this, Zheng rode the sky stick to besides Imhotep. Patting Imhotep's shoulder, he said, relax. There's still us. We're comrades, how could we possibly let you fight alone? This capital ought to be strong. God definitely wouldn't give out a movie world that let people farm points as you wished and be carefree. This movie's difficulty is at least at the team wipe difficulty. Also, according to Xian's power formula, what we will face will definitely not merely be just a single giant dragon. A team's strength was based on its members. The stronger each member was, the stronger the team was overall. God's evaluation of the team's strength wasn't only determined by the team members. 1. It was through the difficulty of movies completed prior by the team. If a weak team completed an extremely difficult movie, the evaluation of this team would immediately become very high. Secondly, it was decided using the power of the enhancements all the team members exchanged. If you exchanged a very strong enhancement, God's evaluation of you would rise. But if you created an ability or unlocked the genetic constraint, God's evaluation wouldn't rise, as this was your personal power, not something obtained from God. For example, the current Gen, if solely based on enhancements, would definitely not have too high an evaluation. But his self-created abilities and power were too overly powerful, so he far surpassed the range of God's evaluation. So, based on this calculation, this movie may have difficulty, but definitely not one we can't handle. Moreover, high-tech weapons can be used. In other words, even if we can't win, we can use the magic cannon to destroy everything. This movie definitely won't pose a problem for us. Only when Zheng finished speaking did he deeply exhale. The Xian besides him suddenly took out a fresh red apple and took a bite of it. Suddenly, he smiled coldly. A mortal's wisdom, but you've finally improved from idiocy to a mortal's wisdom. You've only spoken of one aspect. Let me ask you, is it only our team who has surpassed our evaluations? Zheng froze for a while. Surpassed our evaluations. We should count those who have self-created abilities, even that idiot vampire of Team Pacific. Team Celestial, Team Devil, and even Neos team. What do you mean? Just say it directly. I admit I have a mortal's wisdom, alright? Xian didn't stop smiling coldly and took another bite of the apple. In other words, the final battle is no longer a question of when. God has no choice but to start the final battle. Do you still not understand? Based on your previous analysis, this movie's difficulty is actually very high. This capital surely hides power that can wipe an entire team. However, to us who possess the magic cannon, even if we don't use it, you can destroy the whole capital yourself. God's evaluation no longer holds much use. If things progress like this further, several teams can just farm points no matter what movie we face. This realm has already lost the purpose it should have. At that time, what thoughts do you think God can think of, but the coming of the final battle? A mortal's wisdom. So what? Zheng was slightly ashamed into anger. Mortal wisdom this and mortal wisdom that. Then, you show some Xian's wisdom. Xian gave a sidelong glance at Zheng. Pushing up his spectacles, he said, your third stage stimulation can already let you see the trajectory of some things behind the scenes. So why not ponder over some questions more? I can't possibly always be by your side. In the future anyways, this movie still has some things you're still not clear about, like its side quests. Side quests? Everyone attached great importance to these two words. After all, these two words represented points and rank rewards, or perhaps even the existence of certain secret treasures. So, Side quests had to be completed when they were discovered. As you said just now, God wouldn't give an easy world that let you farm points, nor will it give you a team wipe movie. This difficulty in the middle is defined using God's evaluation you mentioned just now. Us of Team China definitely won't have too high an evaluation. At least for Independence Day we didn't destroy the alien headquarters but relied on the guide to complete the movie. And with the rating deduction from the previous leader death, our evaluation should add a high-ranked team, but definitely incomparable to Team Celestial and Team Devil. Based on the principle that God won't give a team wipe mission, the capital massacre mission must have a side quest. Zheng suddenly had a bad premonition. He curiously asked, what kind of side quest? It's massacring the capital anyways. Don't tell me there will be some kind of helper assisting us. There is. For example, letting those who leave the capital become free men who don't need to be chased down by us. This way, we can then complete God's mission within 3 days. Xian ate the apple as if nothing had happened. The mission God gave was to massacre all living things in the capital within 3 days. But these words instead easily created some ambiguity. First was to massacre all living things in the capital, with those that leave the capital not included. Second was to massacre all living things in the capital, with those that leave to be chased down. Based on these two meanings, different endings and methods of handling it could be created, which was exactly what Zheng was worried about. Didn't you say both situations was possible? I decided to take the bet because I heard your suggestion. Zheng finally understood what that bad premonition was. I lied to you. Xian bit into his apple as if nothing had happened. Don't hold me back. Wangxia and Imhotep, scram. I'm going to kill this idiot. The disturbance in the sky didn't arouse anyone's attention. In this world, few could fly in the sky. Apart from dragon riders, there were only magic users, but they wouldn't be as bored as to fly 10,000 meters into the sky to fight. The basic situation is like that. From God's wording, God wants the massacre of all living things in the capital. If the living things in the capital are too many, but their individual strength isn't high, then it could be just a massacre of all living things in the capital, with those that leave the capital not included. But if the living things in the capital aren't many, but their individual strength is high, or if a certain few have great strength, then it'll definitely be the other possibility. As long as these living things were once inside the capital, then we'll have to chase them to the end no matter how far they go in order to complete this mission. Xian rubbed his slightly swelled up face. Zheng frowned. Why? Is there some difference? It should be all the living things within the capital, right? The scope of battle. Xian coldly laughed. How much activity do you think is needed to kill a weak living thing such as normal humans or the gnomes in European fantasy movies? With a technological weapon, a single bullet is enough. But how much activity would there be if it's a giant dragon, giants, or the ring wraiths and balrogs we met back in Lord of the Rings? It's possible to go out from inside and end up killing them outside. If it's a 100 meters long giant dragon? A single flight will be kilometers away. Do you think this would still count as within the capital, or outside? So, when Imhotep felt that there were organisms below stronger than him, God's mission was ascertained. All the living things inside need to be killed. Any that runs out needs to be chased down and killed, until all living things are dead. Unless we become aware of the sole opportunity for life that God left inside, which is also the side quest I referred to. In the original movie, the princess, who in order to steal the dragon egg, was captured by the magician sent by the king. If it's her rallying, how many civilians and soldiers will leave with her? If my deduction is correct, saving her is the single path of survival God gave. At that time she will rally them to leave the capital, and those that leave the capital won't need to be chased down and killed by us. At that time, our enemies will only be those living things left defending the capital as well as the giant dragon of the king. A gamble. Or perhaps, Xian was originally already a gambler. Of course, this was just a generally speaking. Xian was fundamentally a genetically altered person who paid particular attention to probability. Everything in his eyes was divided into probabilities. Although the closer he got to the mid-4th stage, the more he changed. At this moment his fundamental aspects hadn't had much of a change. He was still that Xian with wisdom that far surpassed mortals. This series of deductions and schemes were all built on probabilities. Of course, to make these deductions and calculating these probabilities weren't something ordinary people could do. That was why Zheng was so troubled just now, because he had fallen for Xian's trick, and had already promised before to start the plot themselves. He had arranged for Wangxia to spread rumors that the main character had obtained the dragon's egg. This way, King Galbatorix would definitely send out people to hunt down and kill him. Now, he couldn't even regret it if he wanted to. The capital already had people who left. Although Team China had strength that could kill anyone, they didn't know how many had left, and where they had gone. This was what Zheng had kept worrying about. When someone left the capital, everyone in Team China would die after 30 days if they couldn't chase down and kill that person. Because he had previously trusted Xian's words, or perhaps his misdirection, he had made the decision to start the plot. When he found out Xian was tricking him before, Zheng really wanted to kill this man. Especially when he said those words, "I lied to you," while biting the apple. The basic situation is like that. Xian had at some unknown time taken out a cucumber, saying as he bit, "Since things have already progressed to this stage, then we'll do it based on the deduction that a side quest exists." In other words, suddenly using the magic cannon isn't possible. We need people to sneak into the capital, find Princess Arya's location and either make contact with her or save her. I think a notification will appear from God at that time. What do you all think? What is things have already progressed to this stage? Zheng shouted and made an uproar. He charged at Qian and shouted, "You idiot. I keep repeating again and again, we are comrades, so why can't you tell us your deductions and schemes beforehand? You take me as an idiot every single time, and just casually say I lied to you after scheming against me. What do you take me for?" I suppose a foolable mortal's wisdom," Qian directly said after thinking it through for a while. "Don't block me. Wangxia, Imhotep, let go of me. I want to kill this idiot." The racket occurred again. After a moment, it quietened down. Qian's originally slightly swelled up face had completely swelled up, and looking at him, he didn't feel one whit of pain, leisurely eating his cucumber as usual. "Anyways, things have already progressed to the stage." Zheng rubbed his forehead, and painfully said, "Then, we must first obtain the location where Princess Arya is being held. Of course, charging directly into the capital isn't impossible. But based on the original plot, it seems only the magician Durza and the king Galbatorix know where she's locked up. So that we don't alert them, it's better to spend some time slowly infiltrating and finding clues. Yingkong, you're in charge of sneaking into the capital. If you don't need to kill, then refrain from killing. If you meet danger, then switch your personality or contact us. Imhotep, you're in charge of heading to the villages outside the capital to probe information. Try not to attract attention. If possible, using your magic to control people is fine. Follow what I said before. If you meet danger, you can kill, or contact us. Qian and Wangxia, the two of you will stay nearby and wait for an opportunity. Provide support if you discover any situation." Everyone nodded, then Wangxia suddenly asked curiously, "What about you? What do you plan to do?" "I'm going to feel out the entire royal palace, especially the hidden power in the royal palace. I'm paying very much attention to this. Imhotep's senses are more exceptional than ours in certain aspects. He is an undead creature after all. Perhaps, this movie world isn't as relaxing as we thought." Zheng sighed when he spoke to this point, then looked at the capital again. "There's still more than 2 days left. Let's try our best to finish this movie in 3 days. I hope the young dragon on the other side can mature faster." Zheng rode the sky stick to the ground as he spoke. Gradually, he was further and further away from the rest. At this moment, outside the village far from the capital, the main character Aragon was cutting a sorry figure as he ran in the grove. Together with him was his uncle. Unfortunately, after running for a short while, his cousin had been lost in the forest, or perhaps even captured by those soldiers. Even more unfortunately, that middle-aged warrior had obviously already been defeated. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many soldiers hot in pursuit of them. Compared to the village, the number of soldiers had increased, with at least 10 soldiers tightly pursuing them not far away. "What exactly did you steal? Why are so many soldiers chasing you?" Aragon's uncle was panting, and no longer had the energy to be mad. "A dragon's egg. I didn't steal it, I picked it up in the forest." Although Aragon was exhausted running, he still maintained his bottom line, and defended himself. "Dragon egg? That belongs to the king. And it's an egg that a young dragon will hatch out of. You idiot, you'll cause everyone's deaths." Aragon's uncle was flustered and exasperated upon hearing this, but he didn't stop running forward. He didn't dare to have the slightest pause, as over 10 soldiers were chasing them non-stop from behind. "There. I see them. They're over there." A scout suddenly shouted loudly. Compared to civilians like Aragon, the scouts in the army had learned many reconnaissance skills, especially those for in the forest. They were untold times better than Aragon. When the two ran another several hundred meters, the figures of those soldiers were already appearing behind Aragon and his uncle. Aragon got more nervous the more he ran. When he saw the soldiers behind getting nearer and nearer, and 2 of them even drawing back their bows, he stepped on a suddenly protruding tree root in his fluster. He fell down and rolled on the mud, and from far off, an arrow shot into his lower leg. A far-off officer shouted, kill them all. As you kill off the rider, the dragon will instantly die." Hearing that, the soldier who had already put down his bow raised it once again. The young dragon in Aragon's hands could only anxiously cry out. Suddenly, the bow-drawing soldier was torn into 2 sections at the waist with a bang. The 2 sections were sent flying a distance by this huge force. By the time he crashed into a huge tree, that soldier had already disintegrated. There's a change in the situation. The main character has already encountered mortal danger, but the young dragon actually didn't mature. So, we need to save them first. Maybe we still need time for the young dragon to mature. I'll clean up those soldiers first. Hung, can you save that middle-aged warrior? At a distant hillside from where Aragon was, Zero was lying prone and silently holding the Gauss sniper rifle. Even if the distance from the forest was far, it looked as if it were right before his eyes with his body constitution and enhanced eyes. Over the next minute, he fired several shots in succession, with not a single shot missing. When he picked up the gun from the ground, there were no longer any soldiers in the forest below. On the other side of the village, the middle-aged warrior had also encountered the same situation as Aragon. He originally already couldn't beat the increasing number of soldiers. When he planned to flee, he hadn't thought that several soldiers far off were intending to snipe him. When the middle-aged warrior had yet to turn around, several arrows were shot with speed that was hard to follow with the naked eye, and the soldiers drawing their bows immediately collapsed to the ground. The force of these arrows was huge, and actually nailed these soldiers to the ground, where they died on the spot. The middle-aged warrior turned around. He dumbly stood rooted at his position. He didn't know where those endless radiant arrows of energy were being fired from. These arrows were obviously terrifyingly powerful, with every soldier shot by it being dragged along by the arrow as it flew far. If based on the arrow's power, it could obviously completely penetrate a person. The archer had used some unknown special technique, which actually dragged along the corpse and made it fly. When they landed, no soldier was still alive. This entire process merely took just slightly over 10 seconds, as if the archer wasn't even aiming, or there were multiple people shooting. This difficulty and power made the middle-aged warrior's entire body tremble, and he stood there rooted to the spot. It can basically be determined that apart from the unknown combat power in the capital, the power of this movie is even lower than we expected. Not only can we use technological abilities, we are stronger by many times than this world's inhabitants in just body constitution. They can't even compare to ordinary soldiers in Lord of the Rings. My sole concern now is the strength of this world's giant dragons and magicians. From the original movie, the magician seems very strong. It's just that we don't know if he can cause us life-threatening danger. Zheng was sitting on a protruding stone pillar next to the royal palace. This stone pillar looked primitive, and was completely different in style from the royal palace. It had some similarities to the ruins of ancient Greece. Zheng had seen these stone pillar ruins at one glance, and was using the top of the stone pillar as a foothold. The basic situation is like that. Bah! Guys, take it that I did not just say that. Anyways, all of you stay at your posts. Yinkong, come with me to explore the royal palace. In the Aragon movie, the capital of Alagagia wasn't extensively described. Apart from the time the main character rode his dragon mount to go save Princess Arya, a description of the royal capital hadn't really appeared. This Aragon was also no longer a movie, but a truly rational world, with a capital more colossal and magnificent than in the movie. It could also possibly have an existence that far surpassed the Aragon movie. This is what I've been worried about. Logically speaking, nothing should really make Imhotep scared. Although energy weapons and magical items can indeed harm him, his personal strength should be sufficiently strong. Even the magician in the original plot won't necessarily be able to beat him. If Imhotep can't win, he would definitely still be able to flee. What exactly is this power that is making him fearful? Zheng jumped off the stone pillar, while using the silver metal piece to talk to Xian. The consciousness on the other side seemed to be absent-minded, and only going through the motions when it replied. Zheng didn't take offense, but continued talking. If I didn't guess wrongly, I feel that this movie shouldn't be as simple as we imagined. It should have something that exceeds the scope of Aragon's plot, which should be that power that made Imhotep fearful. What do you feel? Xian, I'm talking to you. Put down the documents in your hands. Even if Zheng didn't look, he knew that Xian should be researching those cultivation techniques up in the sky. He didn't know exactly how many screws this fellow had loose. Recently, Xian had been researching cultivation techniques as if he no longer cared about life. The rarely seen fanatical expression had now become commonplace. Those around who had seen this had gotten goosebumps, with Zheng feeling apprehensive himself. Xian on the other end put down his documents helplessly, before showing an indifferent expression. What do you want to ask? We've encountered things that exceeds the plot many times in other movie worlds. Every movie likely has something that exceeds normal, and these usually pose a great threat to teams. It's not as if you don't know this. What's the point of making a fuss? That's not what I mean. Zheng shook his head. As we're getting closer and closer to the final battle, especially with Honglu, and you sure that it will come in 1 or 2 movies, don't you think that God will tell us something in this situation? Xian sighed upon hearing this. After a long time, he continued speaking. I originally didn't plan to analyze this for you. That's right. God indeed hasn't told us many mysteries yet. So, in the remaining movies, there will likely be mysteries that God will hide within them. But this isn't what you should worry about or go understand. Your only goal now should be to raise your strength. Since you can't win in mental state over your clone, then you can't lose in strength too much. Do you know what I've been doing? What have you been doing? Zheng asked, baffled. Xian snapped his fingers. I've been trying to research cultivation techniques as fast as possible. Perhaps you yourself didn't notice, but your power level, or so to say the future you have chosen, has surpassed the paths that God set for us. You're neither a possessor of cultivation techniques, nor are you someone who purely relies on unlocking the genetic constraint to get stronger. Or, you can think of it as that you've combined the specialties of the saints and cultivators. Although we can't see anything special so far, but that's because you don't possess true cultivation techniques. Perhaps all the groundwork laid before is for the sake of a metamorphosis in the final battle. This is why I'm so anxious to understand cultivation techniques. So, even if this movie world truly has something left behind by God, use the magic cannon to resolve it if it's too dangerous. Before the final battle, I hope not to lose powerful chess pieces or combat power that can be used to scheme. Understood? The scheme for the final battle. Although that powerful chess piece sounds grating, this should be a special address, Xian said as he doesn't know how to express his feelings towards his comrades. This dishonest fellow, he was researching cultivation techniques specially for the final battle. Zheng sighed. Understood. Under the condition that my strength can deal with it, I will probe this thing that exceeds the Aragon plot. If my strength can't deal with it, I will decisively use the magic cannon, so as to not bring danger to everyone else. All is for the sake of the final battle, is that what you mean? Correct. Xian looked at the documents in his hand once again as he spoke. Even if it means giving up on abandoning the Heart's Devil, I will let Team China safely pass the final battle, and let Team China ascend to the apex of all the teams. Even if only one person is left, Team China definitely shall not be exterminated. Xian. Since very long ago, roughly when they were fighting the giant dragon in Jurassic Park and the others had thought Zheng had died after he used destruction for the first time, he had suspected that Xian already had emotions. Or, perhaps to say, the emotions hidden in his heart were finally starting to surface from the deepest levels of his subconscious. Every movie after that had deepened those emotions of his. This seemingly unfeeling man was actually as pure as a blank sheet of paper. Or perhaps, he was a boy, as his inner heart seemed to have stopped since childhood. In truth, the emotions he had always been seeking had always been buried deep in his heart ever since his father had brought him to see the stars. So, just like the dedications that have persisted throughout his life, whether it's the dedication towards the unknown, towards the largest probability, towards emotions, towards the senses, it can be said that, second only to emotions, Team China is the thing he is most dedicated to in his life. Since we called him a comrade, since he became a comrade of ours, everything he has done has been him working hard for his dedication. Is that why, even if only one person is left, Team China must survive? Xian. Zheng didn't know what he was feeling. When he switched off the silver-colored metal piece, his mind continuously recalled all his experiences after entering the realm since Resident Evil. Xian dying, Zero dying, G dying till the great changes in Resident Evil, Apocalypse. Then until continuously reviving everyone, then explosion, destruction and the battles of wit. Everything he had experienced in his time in this realm seemed extremely long and profound compared to what he had experienced in the decades before. This was where he battled and survived. I understand. Even if there's only one person left, Team China must stand at the apex amongst the teams in the realm. Team China must live on. Definitely. Zheng contemplated as he walked, and was so engrossed that when he turned around a bend, he ended up colliding into a 2-meter-tall red-skinned Urgal. These Urgals were King Galbatoric's standard troops, a savage race with battle prowess surpassing humans. This group of 10+ Urgals had superior equipment, and actually looked to have the fierce impression of a king's guard. Zheng and that Urgal froze at the same time. Then, that Urgal's head was directly blown off. The powerful force not only easily caused the head to collapse, but also sent the corpse flying over 10 meters away, sending the 2 Urgals behind him crashing into a wall together with him. Those 2 Urgals immediately turned into a bloody pulp, while the Urgal whose head had exploded more or less had his body torn to pieces and his bones crushed. Since we've already met by accident, I won't be polite then. Zheng kneaded his fingers, coldly smiling as he walked slowly towards the Urgals before his eyes. A minute later, the passageway was fully covered with the corpses of Urgals. Only 2 Urgals, their arms broken by Zheng, were rolling about non-stop on the ground. However, they didn't dare to shout out loudly. Just now, any Urgal who had let out noise had been instantly turned into a bloody pulp by punches that couldn't be caught by the eye. As Zheng's attack speed was too fast and that enormous force demonstrated an overwhelming dominance, these Urgals didn't even display the most basic resistance. It could be said that Zheng already existed at a level of power above them. It was a completely different level of power, just like how humans overlooked the ants on the ground. Do you know where Princess Arya is being locked up? Zheng smiled coldly, asking the 2 Urgals. The 2 Urgals were in a bit of a daze. They obviously hadn't recovered from the shock of losing. An elite team of beastmen soldiers actually hadn't even been able to touch their opponent's clothes. This human strength was simply too great. Was he a dragon rider? Bang. A boom echoed out. Zheng's punch went through one of the Urgal's head to his waist, and his entire upper body was smashed into pieces. Zheng had overused his strength. Ever since he had used Chaos Genesis Splitter and hadn't died from it, a certain change had naturally occurred in his body. In the time since then, Zheng's control over his strength had largely weakened. Actually, it wasn't that his control had weakened, but that his power and speed had once again substantially increased, together with his body strengthening once again. At this rate, am I going to become a monster? Or, have I already long since been an inhuman monster to others? Zheng laughed bitterly as he shook off the gore on his hand. Without waiting for him to continue speaking, the remaining Urgal's entire body had already gone limp and he fell kneeling to the ground, and he began to say all he knew in an unceasing torrent. Lord Magician is controlling that elf princess. Yes, only magicians can deal with magicians. No, you can too. This Urgal had already been scared silly. Not only was he stammering, there was also some incoherence. Zheng frowned. He naturally knew after watching Aragon that that so-called magician was King Galbatoric's #1 subordinate, a magician who could summon creatures from the demon world. In the original movie, he was a powerful magic user who was even better than elf princess Arya, who also used magic. In the final segment of the movie, he had almost killed Aragon, and could be said to be one of the rare powerhouses in Aragon. That's all right as well. Directly disposing of him is fine, Zheng softly whispered. He then said to the Urgal, bring me to the residence of this magician. Don't play any tricks. I don't know how many guards that disturbance just now attracted. It's very easy to abandon you and find someone else to lead the way. The Urgal nodded continuously in terror. He reluctantly stood up from the ground, his entire body trembling. He drew strength from some unknown place, and simply continued to go down this passageway. On the way, they continuously met Urgal guards that were hurrying over. Of course, them coming only just added to the corpses on the ground. The current Zheng was like how Xian had spoken of before, an overwhelmingly powerful strength that could completely disregard the so-called influence and wisdom. This city looked magnificent from the outside, as it was after all built against a mountain. It looked rather like the ancient castles of Europe's Middle Ages. But it wasn't too large, and simply couldn't compare to the giant cities of ancient China. However, when Zheng stepped into the city, he realized their previous estimations had been wrong. This castle was bigger than they had thought, as this castle continued deep downwards. What was shown of the entire underground castle from outside wasn't even a tenth of the actual body. Oh. You all are only the guards for the outer perimeter? What living things are inside? That's right, where's your king, Galbatorix? Zheng asked as he walked. The Urgal leading the way was the one he had captured before. After the massacre on the way, this Urgal had long since killed off the notion of escaping. After all, he had personally witnessed Zheng bare-handedly killing over 100 Urgals. This strength simply wasn't something a human should possess, so this human before him had already been determined to be a demon by him long ago. Inside are the creatures from the demon world that Lord Magician and His Highness summoned. The maximum we can go to is the second underground floor. The soldiers guarding there are Black Knights. We don't know any more after that. Lord Magician stays at the third underground floor. As for the king, he seems to stay at the lowest floor of the castle, the Urgal replied carefully. As expected. This castle does have power that exceeds Aragon's plot. Why does it sound so familiar though? Dragon Riders, underground castle, magicians, giant dragons, Black Knights, isn't this just Dungeons and Dragons? With endless rules, and countless gods. Wizards and demons fill and walk the world. Whatever planes of existence, whatever demon world planes. That's it? Planes of existence. Zheng's thoughts suddenly moved. He thought of the planes of existence in Dungeons and Dragons rules. Every plane had its own laws, as well as different coordinates and sizes. The universe was filled with an infinite number of planes. Wasn't this similar to God's realm? Every world was different. It was either the power of magic that was prevalent, or the power of technology. There was even a countless number of monsters and other living things. Wasn't all this exactly what God's realm exhibited? Could it be that the true meaning of this Aragon movie is at the bottommost floor of this castle? Zheng thought as he walked, the Urgal and him slowly making their way down a set of stairs again. Suddenly, for some unknown reason, his entire body began to shiver the moment he stepped onto this floor. The chi and blood energy within his body began to churn, with his chi especially, beginning to automatically flow, the same way it would when he exercised. The Urgal's body began to shiver all over as well. It looked like it wasn't due to fear, but a natural reaction of the body. This floor was obviously much cooler than the floor above. No, accurately speaking, it should be a kind of negative energy that made people feel a faint coldness. We aren't allowed to go further down from here onwards. We'll only be allowed to move things to the third floor when Lord Magician occasionally needs heavy things moved. The Urgal said as he shivered. He's no longer familiar with the next part of the road. I should catch a Black Knight. I don't know what kind of creature that is, so I might as well estimate its battle prowess at the same time. Zheng frowned as he looked at the Urgal with broken arms in front of him. The Urgal seemed to sense something, and looked in terror at Zheng. After a long time, Zheng sighed. Go. Run away as far as you can. I can't recognize you anyways, so the next time I see you I'll be making my move instantly. Understand? You're on your own, good luck. Finished speaking, Zheng ignored the Urgal and proceeded to the depths of the passageway. Each floor became larger the deeper down the castle you went, appearing to be an inverted funnel shape. Coupled with the simple and unadorned stone floor and that gloomy passageway, this underground castle really had that queer flavor of Dungeons and Dragons. However, Zheng didn't have the mood to sightsee and examine anything. He randomly walked all over the place following his senses. After a short while, he slowly became clearer about the topography here. Xian, this is the second underground level. I'll continue downwards. Yingkong, continue to explore the upper levels. See if there are any strange places. Imhotep, have you obtained any useful news from the merchants in the market? Zheng searched for a short while and finally found a staircase leading down. Standing at the staircase area, he opened the silver metal plate, fulfilling his duties as the leader as he asked the other two their situations. No important information. However, they seemed very afraid of discussing the matter of the elf princess. Are you right? There's an interesting piece of information. I heard them talk about a myth in this world. Supposedly, a long time ago mankind and dragons didn't fight side by side, and dragon riders didn't exist. Then, demons invaded the world. Dragons or humans alone couldn't resist those demons. Thus, they cooperated and formed the Dragon Rider battle team. After a long battle, they forced the demons back to hell, and sealed the entrance to hell right below this capital. How do you find this information? Imhotep replied. The entrance to hell? That's an important piece of information. I'm now at the entrance to the underground castle. I don't know what's down there, so leave it to me to check it out first to be safe. Well, do it like this. Everyone, do your own job. Xian, pay attention to the situation over at Zero's side. If anything happens, notify me. Understand? Zheng said seriously to Xian. In the end, There was only silence. That fellow, Xian, was engrossed in cultivation techniques again. Whatever. I won't pay attention to that idiot. Well, just do our own jobs. Zheng closed the silver-colored metal piece, rubbing his head as he walked into the third underground floor. There wasn't much difference between the second and third underground floor, but the aura of that negative energy being thicker. As Zheng was confident due to his skill, he casually walked in the passageway, unafraid of any possible traps or other living things. Before a minute or two had passed, the clanking sounds of armor resounded from a distance. Sure enough, when Zheng turned a corner, a group of black-armored soldiers appeared. The bodies of these black-armored soldiers were completely covered in the armor, and that armor continuously let off a grayish-black aura. Their appearance actually had some similarities to the 9 ring wraiths in Lord of the Rings, only that their armor wasn't as shocking or luxurious. Black Knights? They really do look mighty. Zheng looked at the group of Black Knights 20 meters away. The group was about 20 strong, and were orderly arranged in formation. When they saw Zheng's existence, they had practically the same speed and posture as they withdrew the two-handed giant swords from their waist. If they weren't formed up in succession, they would have looked like mirror reflections of one another. The width of the passageway was around 3 meters. If they swung around two-handed heavy swords, only 2 Black Knights could attack him. However, this was enough, as the Black Knights had sufficient might. The foremost Black Knight swung his sword when he was several meters from him, actually generating wind blades that sliced at him. Although it wasn't too powerful, there would definitely be blood if it were an ordinary person. Zheng frowned. His foot stepped down, and he charged at this Black Knight. While it still hadn't withdrawn its two-handed heavy sword, he directly struck out with a punch at the Black Knight's chest. The sound of metal colliding burst out. Shockingly, only the chest of the Black Knight sank in from the punch, and it pushed several Black Knights behind it several meters away. Then, it walked onwards as if nothing had happened. It had to be known that Zheng's current strength was practically 15,000 kilograms of force. Even a simple punch wouldn't be much less powerful than the explosion of a hand grenade. It was because of this strength that it wasn't necessary for him to pursue any kind of technique, and it was sufficient to just purely use force to break through technique. Although he hadn't yet used explosion, this Black Knight wasn't actually the slightest bit harmed under this punch. The strength of this organism was sufficient to brag about. They were stronger than the elite orc soldiers in Lord of the Rings that could use battle chi. Rather, they should be 2 to 3 times stronger. It's still fine for me. If it's Hung and the rest, then they could possibly really be in danger if they get pincered by them, especially in a tunnel like this. It looks like the power levels of Aragon aren't as weak as it looks externally. Zheng pondered back and forth, but his hands didn't stop moving. The punch before had been ineffectual, so he intentionally increased his force, and even slightly activated his chi. Every punch and kick caused thunderous booms, and when his leg stomped down, the ground would crack open. Then, the helmet of the Black Knight in front of him flew off. Zheng had easily struck this Black Knight with speed difficult to follow with the eyes. However, what surprised him was that there was actually no fleshy body under the helmet. Accurately speaking, this Black Knight was merely a suit of armor. It was no wonder that nothing had happened when he had punched out, when what was fighting him was just a suit of armor. Ho ho, so it was like this. This is troublesome to handle. Several minutes later, only a large pile of crushed metal pancakes were left in the passageway, with even the two-handed heavy swords and armors crushed together into those pancakes. The Black Knights were no longer able to move. Although the Black Knights were unable to hurt or even block Zheng, their numbers in the third underground floor were simply too many. On the way, Zheng had been pestered non-stop by these Black Knights. He had already crushed 100 metal pancakes, and still wasn't done yet. It seemed like the Black Knights on this floor were inexhaustible, becoming especially dense when he headed in a certain direction. Just like that, Zheng wasted tens of minutes before he was no longer able to bear with this turtle-like speed. Before, he had been careful to conserve his chi and blood energy so as to avoid any powerful beings that may be below. He finally began to use explosion, seeming to become a whirlwind. All that could be seen was a person flashing by, and all the Black Knights in the passageway would be sent crashing in all directions towards the walls. They were all deeply embedded in the rock and were unable to come out no matter how they struggled. Zheng, on the other hand, charged forward nonchalantly. Only when he reached a bright area did he stop explosion. This was a place with rarely seen light in the third underground floor. Although the other areas had torches inserted at the walls, they were still dim and had a ghastly feeling. Only this place suddenly let out a sunlight-like lighting. It was a room that wasn't too eye-catching. The door area was densely packed with magic runes written there, which were what was producing that light. Are these magical things? I don't know if I can obtain what's here. How interesting, I didn't think we would be able to obtain these extra things in Aragon. Right, perhaps the documents exposing the truth left behind by saints and cultivators are among these, like that will left behind by that saint, Anubis. Zheng was talking to himself. The more he thought about it, the more excited he was. At once, he raised his legs to walk to that room. But right when he walked to the area of magic runes, he ran into an invisible defensive barrier. Zheng didn't dare to use brute force. After all, this defensive barrier may not solely be defensive. Wouldn't forcefully breaking it apart destroy the whole room if it had offensive properties? Just the elf princess Arya lying inside made him not dare to act recklessly. Doraemon, I found something interesting. How about it? Want to come down and take a look? You've researched cultivation techniques, as well as information left behind by saints and cultivators for so long, so you should be able to solve these magic runes, right? Zheng thought about it, before taking out the silver-colored metal piece to contact Qian. Qian directly said, I saw it long ago. Not bad, there are magical mechanisms. He'll be making a trip down. Qian. You can't possibly be using this metal piece to keep surveilling us, right? Damn it, why can't our metal pieces do that? Zheng immediately started scolding. He suddenly remembered how during the Grudge movie, Qian had made a type of communication device for them. However, Qian's had been the main device, which could listen in on the conversations between the other devices. Qian spoke as if nothing had happened. It's not the silver-colored metal piece. I made the same for all of us. It's something else. While speaking, an electrical light suddenly flashed faintly in Qian's right eye. If closely inspected, one would notice a grotesquely shaped rune image in his eye, with an 80 to 90% similarity to the script in the cultivation techniques from the documents in his hand. Forget it, I don't care exactly what you did. You've never told us anything before anyways, right? Since you can see me, can you see the situation down below? Help me see what's downstairs. Zheng sighed. He was too lazy to get mad at that fellow Qian, so he might as well make his request. Qian didn't say any more. The rune image in his right eye began to operate. To his right eye, the entire world became one of only energy. For example, the sky stick beneath his feet possessed energy that was obviously more than that of the surroundings, while his own bonus energy was not just 100-folds that of the sky stick. The ground was dotted with densely packed energy clumps, each symbolizing a living thing. Among them, there were several thousand in the capital area that were obviously several times greater than those in the surrounding villages. Imhotep and Yingkong's energy clumps were as obviously radiant as the moon among these densely packed energy clumps. When he looked further down, the energy clump that represented Zheng was like the sun. Even using the naked eye to look would end up making the eye feel like it was swelling up. That strength was the sole existence that surpassed Qian amongst all the living things. He was indeed very, very strong. There are a total of 5 floors. King Galbatorix is on the floor below. That's right, there's a big dragon next to him. The passageway down is behind the dragon and him. The 5th floor space. I can't see anything while speaking. Qian allowed his right eye to return to normal. When he finished speaking, he immediately began to pant. Zheng didn't know Qian's condition. He only silently considered for a moment, before saying, then he'll leave the magic runes on the 3rd floor to you. He'll go and explore the 5th floor. I'm paying a lot of attention to that rumor about hell. Need me to deal with King Galbatorix on the way? Qian panted for a moment, before indifferently replying, no need. Try your best not to harm the dragon or him. 1. Arya hasn't been rescued yet, so we haven't determined if there's a side quest. 2. The room on the 3rd floor would likely be destroyed by your battle. So, it'll be best not to harm him when entering the 5th floor. The difficulty is pretty high. Zheng smiled bitterly. Fine, well, do it like this. He'll go and meet King Galbatorix, and see how strong this boss that never appeared in the movie is. He'll also go do some sightseeing in hell at the same time. Remember to bring some special products of hell back. With these words from Qian, Zheng walked down the 4th underground floor with some anger. He was still thinking about exactly what kind of method Qian was using to see through. Could it be there was something similar to a tracking device installed on him? While thinking, he had already walked down the stairs to the 4th floor. Just as Zheng reached the 4th floor, the gloomy air before suddenly disappeared, and suddenly turned into a fiery hot aura. It was just like standing at an entrance of magma to a volcano. This 3rd and 4th floor were completely different from the previous 3. It no longer had passageways and rooms. This place was purely a natural underground cavern. It looked incomparably spacious, and Zheng actually couldn't see the end. In terms of space, this layer's size should be equivalent to the entire area the mountain range above took up. How ridiculous still, what's more ridiculous is that Qian, you idiot, this dragon is just a big dragon. Zheng felt so hateful that his gums were aching. The dragon in front of his eyes was what was truly a giant dragon. How big was it? Using that human on it as a comparison, this giant dragon was about 100 meters long, and would be 40 plus meters standing up. Its 2 wings extended would be over 100 meters in width. This giant dragon size even surpassed the one Zheng had met before in Jurassic Park, and was bigger and more powerful than the young dragon he brought even in its matured state. I called it a big dragon, because it's only physically big. In terms of an energy, 10 of those can't equal you. So, no need to worry. Qian said indifferently. What nonsense is it that I don't need to worry? Damn it, the passageway is behind that giant dragon. How do you want me to enter the 5th floor? Zheng practically roared in rage. That's your problem. But I can't come up with any way, which is why I'm asking you. How is that my problem? Wait for me to get out. I will definitely break all your teeth. Zheng was more or less gnashing his teeth as he shouted at the silver-colored metal piece. He then looked at the distance. There was flat ground there, where an outrageously large black dragon was lying down. A middle-aged man was sitting on top of the dragon. Then, let me test out your combat power. Zheng didn't dare to be careless, so he immediately activated explosion. His figure turned into a blur, and he charged at the giant black dragon at an extreme speed. Zheng activated his explosion mode, and his battle power sharply rose. Just his speed increased by several folds compared to before. Although it hadn't reached that ridiculous level of destruction of breaking the sound barrier, he used the speed to charge towards within 1,000 meters of the giant dragon within a short time. Then, his entire body seemed to slam into an invisible wall, with even a bang sound produced. Because he had been moving at high speed, he was immediately knocked into confusion. Guessed from afar, what is it that prompted you to probe this taboo? Based on your strength, you should know what this taboo represents, right? Return. This is not a place you should be. The man sitting on the giant black dragon, or accurately speaking King Galbatorix, spoke sternly to the 1,000 meters away Zheng. Zheng didn't reply. What he was currently most afraid of was to incite the plot, so he might as well ignore King Galbatorix's questions. He directly extended a hand onto the defensive barrier, pondering how to break through. No need to waste your energy thinking. This is Dragon Tongue magic. You're so powerful, so you should be a dragon rider, right? And one with their dragon still alive at that. You should know that my dragon is the Black Dragon, the largest and most powerful dragon. How did you get in without Dragon Tongue magic, when your giant dragon isn't by your side? King Galbatorix wasn't angry upon seeing Zheng not speak, instead smiling coldly and continuing to talk. Dragon Tongue magic? Speaking of which, the main character could indeed borrow the power of his dragon in the Aragon movie. Using abilities similar to magic, as well as this invisible defensive barrier in front of me. Why does it feel so much like the defensive barrier of the dragon's hard necklace that guards against high-tech weapons? Zheng's mind moved, and he came up with an idea. Could it be that the Dragon Rider team was actually the human controlling the energy within the giant dragon's body, with the goal of creating various effects? After all, he had come across an organism like a giant dragon before. Although it was in another movie world, but looking at that body shape and size, there were many similarities with this overwhelmingly large giant dragon before him. If a giant dragon's ability was only to turn energy into dragon fire and defensive barriers against high technology, giving this energy to a human to use could possibly create various magics and defensive barriers that guarded against all attacks. This was the origin of the Dragon Rider team. Otherwise, with an ordinary human's weak body, how could they dominate a powerful and large dragon? If so, could our young dragon display this power if it grows big? It's just that, do we have anyone that can become its Dragon Rider? Zheng considered non-stop, but his hands never stopped moving. He punched out repeatedly at that invisible defensive barrier, with every consecutive punch mightier than the last. Later on, each punch had loud booming sounds, like a wrecking ball for demolishing buildings was striking metal. Originally, King Galbatorix had a cold expression watching Zheng strike the defensive barrier. To him, Zheng doing this was undoubtedly very stupid. It could even be described as idiocy. Did he think he could break apart the defensive barrier with a human's power? But, what happened next exceeded King Galbatorix's expectations. Was this man truly human? Just from the sound, he didn't doubt the shockingly destructive power. If it hit an ordinary human, they would definitely turn into bloody gore instantly. Even if it hit the black dragon he was sitting on, perhaps even the black dragon would feel pain. I already know the rough toughness. So, are you ready? Zheng, who hadn't spoken up at all yet, suddenly lifted his head, smiling. That smile seemed to be hinting something else. AMD Galbatorix looked suspiciously at him. Before he recovered from his shock, he suddenly saw Zheng directly unleash one punch on the defensive barrier. That punch actually tore apart the air into shockwaves. Then, the defensive barrier blocking Zheng actually shattered into fragments, and Zheng disappeared on the spot within a flash. When he appeared, he was 200 meters away from his previous spot. When he disappeared once again, he had covered 200 meters again before reappearing. Instant destruction. Fist gun. Instant destruction. Saru. The two moves used consecutively allowed Zheng to easily pass through the barrier. He then rushed over to where Galbatorix and the giant black-colored dragon were. All this happened within the twinkling of an eye. At the same time, the previously listless dragon actually raised its head. It straightforwardly opened its mouth without thinking, and a stream of flame sprayed out. That flame was purely burning white. Its high temperature was obvious just thinking about it. Zheng didn't dare to be careless, and stomped down forcefully, and more than 1 meter of flat ground of rocks were stomped into shattering. He leapt to a height of 100 meters, then used Jeppo while in the state of multiple consecutive instant destructions. Within a few seconds, Zheng had already rushed to the black dragon's head from over 1,000 meters away. King Galbatorix finally stood up. He looked both surprised and flustered. When this fellow stood up, he looked majestic and imposing, with a nearly 2-meter stature filled with muscle, only to see him carrying a 3-meter-long dragon spear pointed at the sky. Through some unknown way, a black aura flowed down from his head, then reached the dragon spear by flowing along his arm. Then, the dragon spear flashed with a black radiance, shooting like lightning towards Zheng in the sky. The current Zheng had just used Jeppo, and was suspended in midair finding a foothold. In an instant, a sense of danger flashed in his heart. Ever since he had become strong, his sense for danger had become more acute. However, as he got stronger, this feeling hadn't appeared for a very long time. At once, he took out Tiger's soul without thinking and chopped down subconsciously. With a ding sound, that dragon spear and Tiger's soul had already struck each other. When the dragon spear's black energy was exhausted, it finally dropped from the sky. At the same time, Zheng activated explosion, but the area between his thumb and index finger was extremely painful. It was obvious that Galbatorix's power wasn't inferior to him in explosion, and was actually even slightly stronger. After all, he had been continuously exerting force while holding Tiger's soul, while Galbatorix had merely flung out the dragon spear at high speed. Slightly interesting. This kind of powerful person is guarding here, just to block people from entering hell? I'll dispose of him when I come back out. Fortunately, I had the others deal with other tasks just now. If they met this king, perhaps some danger may occur. Zhen looked deeply at Galbatorix. The man had already caught the falling dragon spear, while the dragon also inclined its head to one side, looking at the sky. Right away, Zhen no longer remained, and used Jeppo again, shooting like an arrow at the deep hole behind the giant dragon. It was a deep hole without any stairs, with a width of about 200 meters. 3 sides of the wide hole were rock walls, with the last side blocked by the giant dragon. Zhen was currently on the head of the giant dragon, and easily used the midair directional changing ability of Jeppo to pass the dragon and king, then disappeared into the giant hole. The primordial universe Genesis splitting. Within that void, there was no time, no space, no matter. The entire universe was contained within an infinitely small point mass with infinite mass. Then, that point mass blew up, and from that infinite energy began an endless expansion. Time, space, and matter and everything came into being. In the vast universe, there were countless planets, countless galaxies, and countless worlds. Living things appeared in the boundless starry sky, and with the slow or fast evolution of these living things, intelligent life appeared on these planets. Civilization arose, and societies appeared. Among these countless planets filled with life, a planet that wasn't too eye-catching called Earth also had countless living things. They too, endlessly evolved, until a life form called humans appeared. The initial humans were extremely weak, or perhaps to say, they were only a step ahead of monkeys. And among these high-level monkeys, a small portion obtained extraordinary evolution due to crisis. They unlocked certain limitations of living things, and after obtaining civilization and intelligence, these evolved individuals named this method of evolution as unlocking the genetic constraint. A few of outstanding talent called themselves saints. Because they had unlocked the 5th stage of the genetic constraint, they stood at the apex of all life forms. From the initial bloody path carved out of countless monsters, humanity of that time already possessed an extremely advanced civilization. They had even flown out of Earth, and even had a few bases on Mars. Humanity's future looked bright, and at this time, a few rebels appeared among humanity itself. They didn't respect the saints' path of the genetic constraint, but instead searched for a different method. Using runes and cultivation-type technologies, these people used these technologies to obtain the power to battle saints. While perhaps they may not able to challenge saints individually, their strength was different from saints. Saints could not teach their strength to others, and the genetic constraint was one's personal power. However, these people could pass on their inheritance through knowledge, and thus this organization's power became greater and greater, until the stage they could threaten the traditions of the saints. They were called cultivators. War. Cultivators and saints warred as their deos differed. Both sides were convinced that their path of evolution was absolutely correct, and hoped to pass on their deo of evolution to humanity. Due to this conviction, these two organizations with exceedingly great power actually didn't explore the rest of the cosmos, but instead began a war. This war was known as the Grand Primordial War. A difficult to describe state of being half dreaming and half awake. Zhen didn't know many meters he had fallen. When he recovered, he wasn't even 200 meters away from the ground. His speed was shocking, and even his strong body wouldn't be able to bear this terrifying impact force at this rate of descent. Zhen merely looked down, and cold sweat began to flow on his entire body. His genetic constraint unlocked automatically instantaneously, and his Bodis instincts acted faster than his mind. A Jeppo was used at once, but his speed was too fast, and he already crossed another 100 meters in a moment. A single Jeppo simply was unable to decrease much falling velocity. Zhen didn't care about much else. Destruction was activated at once, and both legs executed Jeppo non-stop at speeds that couldn't be caught with the naked eye. At the same time, he took out Tiger's soul and aimed at the ground. At the same time as his speed decreased continuously, his distance from the ground was less than 10 meters. Zhen poured all his power into Tiger's soul, and hurled the saber downwards. A violent explosion rang out, and Tiger's soul blew apart a giant crater at the ground. Using the updraft that rushed upwards, Zhen finally lowered his speed to something bearable. A lonely bang sound rang out again, and Zhen landed in this crater. Although Zhen had tried his best to stop his fall, he had still fallen miserably. His entire back hurt, and all his skin and flesh had been torn open. It was all thanks to his body being incomparably strong. A normal person would have long since fallen to their death, and he was only in pain but unharmed. Damn it, isn't this giving people a hard time? As soon as we enter this hole we're hypnotized, and some things are told using God's voice. But all this was already deduced by that fellow Xian. What about the rest? Where's the most important part, the rest? Damn. Zhen leapt up from the ground. He ignored the pain in his back, and immediately began to roar abuse. It was unknown whom he was scolding. It turned out that when he first dropped into this hole, it was like when he entered a movie world from God's realm. Everything was hazy, and it was both like being in a dream and being awake. He had heard God's monotonous voice narrate those things, starting from the Genesis splitting of chaos that established heaven and earth. It had spoken of the origin of saints and cultivators, then the great war between them. It had practically ruined the ecological environment of Earth, and made the dinosaurs extinct. The vast majority of humanity perished. The surviving saints and cultivators created humans once again, and used the stored genes left behind by past humans to undergo large-scale reproduction. Humanity recovered from the brink of extermination, but that was after a long time passed. However, in the Great War between cultivators and saints, 70% of them died. But war deserved to be called the number one impetus for human evolution. The Great War allowed both sides to slightly acknowledge the other side's Deo, as well as what the other pursued in regards to evolution. The intelligent ones among the two sides believed that when the two sides joined their power, humanity would evolve to the peak, or perhaps the peak of this universe. At that time, there would be nothing humanity couldn't use, whether space, time, matter, or energy. The fundamental nature of the universe was its sheer enormity, but it would all become humanity's playground. That was what both sides believed to be the peak of their path of evolution, whether the sixth stage of the genetic constraint saints hypothesized there was or the golden immortal of the great firmament that cultivators imagined. Their Deo was different, and their understanding towards the ultimate power was different. However, due to the grand primordial war that had practically shattered the heavens and earth, although they wouldn't have dealings with each other, they wouldn't battle again. That was until they all had a decisive discovery about the necessary power. At that time, they discovered. Damn it, what did they discover? If you want to leave a message, leave it all in one go. Don't be like that fellow Xian and stop halfway. Doing things like this is just asking to be beaten up. Zheng's heart was like it was being clawed at by a cat. Now, he just wanted to know what they discovered. What made the saints and cultivators work together, and ignore the differences in their Deo? What made them build God's realm? What made them so afraid, that they left behind all these last words? The power of saints and cultivators. Although this was only a segment of last words with no pictures, Zheng clearly understood how strong they were. One had a nigh infinite usage of energy and energy manipulation that was clearly a power that only gods could have. The other side reached a level of technology that surpassed modern technology by 1,000 years or even more, such as high technology, rune technology, and those countless miraculous cultivation techniques and creations. Ignoring other things, when Xian only slightly used the ancient bell, he could actually manipulate space and time for a short while. This ability exceeded even that of gods. What kind of existence could terrify saints and cultivators so? Aliens. Impossible. Even if 10,000 motherships from Independence Day appeared, saints and cultivators could butcher them relaxedly. Could it be like what Xian hypothesized? We are in a box, and they know how to escape the box? That conjecture isn't bad. Xian's voice was suddenly transmitted, although he sounded weak. Damn, I just knew you must have definitely put some ability in the silver-colored metal pieces to peek into our heads. Damn it, playing this trick in secret again. How are you? Why does your voice sound so weak? Zheng took out the metal piece to shout at it, and suddenly went from shouting to asking curiously. Xian was currently standing at the passageway in the third underground floor. He was surrounded by armors riddled with bullet holes, and the bullet holes were leaking black aura. Xian's gauze pistols were using spiritual bullets, and could naturally subdue these black knights. Shockingly, one of his arms had been cut off from the shoulder. That severed arm was lying at his feet, and the black knight who had sliced off his hand had already been struck down by gauze bullets. Since you entered the hole, I've been paying attention to over there. I didn't expect that hypnosis to spread to even me. Although I got to hear the last message, the price of having my mind wander during battle is an arm. Xian indifferently rubbed the cut shoulder, and although the bleeding had been staunched, that wound and severed arm on the ground looked hideously horrifying. Zheng didn't say anything more. He still had a lot of faith in Xian's battle prowess. At least in this world, he wouldn't meet any danger. His heart slightly determined, he turned around to look at his surroundings. Only now did Zheng have a clear view of the surroundings. His shock couldn't be put into words, as how was this the fifth floor? This was obviously another world. There was a blood-colored sky with 3 blood-colored suns radiating light. The ground was a field of blood red, and the world seemed to be permeated with a bloody ferocious aura at first glance. At some unknown height, the top of the sky had a black hole. Earthen walls could be faintly made out within the pitch black hole. However, why would that hole strangely appear there? This world looks a little too strange, doesn't it? Zheng considered, then took the sky stick out from the NA ring. He stepped on the sky stick and soared into the sky. When he flew to a height of 1,000 meters and looked down, he saw a vast blood-colored earth with no end in sight. Is it an illusion? Xian, could you help me take a look at the situation here? Zheng was in a slight daze seeing this, and immediately spoke to the silver-colored metal plate. Who do you think I am? I can see it just because I want to. Xian sighed with some helplessness. This thing needs large amounts of energy to activate. I can only use the power of faith of the Lambda driver to activate it, but power of faith itself isn't inexhaustible. Also, down there where you are is pretty strange. I can only see the passageway leading to the 5th floor, but I can't see anything at the 5th floor space. Anyways, search properly yourself down there, and remember your location. Don't be unable to find your way back when the time comes. Zheng made a few sounds. He didn't continue to speak, but instead used the sky stick to continue flying. The hole in the sky was there anyways, and looked like black moonlight. It was extremely obvious, encircled by 3 blood-colored suns. As long as he didn't go too far away from the hole, it was difficult to be lost even if he wanted to. Zheng flew around for a while. This region was vast without end. He flew for a short while and didn't even come across a single living thing. However, he discovered another giant hole not far from the hole in the sky, which was even bigger. It appeared as an irregular circle, with a diameter of at least a few kilometers. It was pitch black and deep, with an unknown depth. What is this? This floor is equivalent to a world, vast and without end. I don't know how long it would take to completely explore it. We only have 3 days to return to God's realm before points are deducted. Damn it, what is this supposed to mean? Another hole for me to jump into appeared. Only an idiot would jump in, damn it. Zheng remembered that thrilling moment before where he almost fallen to his death, and immediately started cursing. Is this Aragon? Just as Zheng was angrily scolding, Xian suddenly interjected with this unrelated line, which made Zheng go blank. After a long time, Zheng unhappily said, of course it's Aragon. Could your head be dizzy now? It can also be considered that this world is under the rules of Dungeons and Dragons, or something close to it. These rules are interesting. It's practically using rules to make a fabricated world. In this world of rules, there's a place that suits the environment you're at. It's called the infinite layers of the abyss. The organisms inside are called demons. The 9 hells of Bader also seem to be a part of the abyss, only that it's a special part of it. Xian ignored Zheng, and started talking to himself. Zheng's head was even more blank, and he asked curiously, what does that mean? Why did you suddenly bring up Dungeons and Dragons? Because I've roughly guessed what they're thinking. Xian used his remaining hand to push up his spectacles. If I haven't guessed wrongly, they're already informing us of something. It's just that they can't say it out. The rules of Dungeons and Dragons were for a world set up by Westerners. After countless people refined it continuously, the world gradually approached balance. It was a pure swords and magic type world. It had humans, elves, dwarves, giant dragons, gods, ghosts, demons, and devils. It could be said to be a hodgepodge-like world, but with countless people continuously refining it, and with the time spent to accumulate knowledge on this subject, this world actually ended up balanced, just as if it were a real world. In Dungeons and Dragons, there was an extremely ominous area called the infinite layers of the abyss. It was a world with countless planes, all mutually interlinked. Even in the abyss, each layer was a plane equivalent to a world, each with different laws. For example, one world could have more positive energy, while another could have more negative energy. It could also be that one was more aligned to the fire element, while another to the water element, with numerous different examples. It could be said to be a strange major world composed from countless minor worlds. Don't you feel that has some similarities to the world before you? Coming down from the hole above leads to a different world. Going down again may again lead to a different world. Aren't all these layers on top of one another similar to how the abyss is? In addition, we're in the Aragon world, and the information before said this is hell. If so, everything that can be told to us has already been told. I think that this should be the information they left behind. What kind of information is this? Zheng had also unlocked the 3rd stage of the genetic constraint, and although he thought for a long time, he couldn't grasp the essential points among them. He suddenly asked, why won't they just directly leave the truth behind? Is it very fun to make people play the guessing game? It's not why won't they, but why can't they? Xian shook his head. Let me try to hypothesize their intentions. Remember what I told you before? When you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. First, let's guess, what they were planning to tell us with all these arrangements. Firstly, we are in Aragon, so giant dragons are what naturally come to mind first. Then, the structure of the underground castle has an 80% possibility of being there to tell us we are under the rules of Dungeons and Dragons. Next, hell, as well as that vast world and abyss, would let you determine that we are either in Bader or the infinite layers of the abyss. It's a planar amalgamation formed from countless interlocked planes. If so, the information they want to leave behind should pertain to the countless worlds. Xian had already walked to before the giant door with runes. He wasn't panicked, but only nodded his head. Well, stop those deductions here. Well, reinfer using the information we have obtained. From the information we had previously, as well as the last message you obtained, 2 things can be confirmed. 1. There were 2 forces during the ancient era, both branches created from human evolution. One were the saints, which focused on body evolution. Second were cultivators, which focused on a combination of rune technology and body evolution. This is something already confirmed. 2. The 2 sides once had a great battle between them. This grand primordial war shattered heaven and earth, and only after a long time did humanity recover their vitality with great difficulty. This is the information we can confirm. What's unconfirmed is what did saints and cultivators discovered after the grand primordial war. This discovery actually made the 2 form an alliance, let them feel terror, and even work together to build God's realm. This meant that after they died out, humanity could follow their path to evolve, and their legacy wouldn't be lost. It's roughly this information. Xian paused when he reached this point. He pushed up his spectacles and contemplated. After a long while, he continued, what's next has my guesses and inferences included. Firstly, we need to understand what they're trying to tell us. I believe that the information we can gain from Aragon based on the rules of Dungeons and Dragons and the abyss you're in and what they're trying to tell us, is that the real world has an infinite number of planes and space. Our Earth and universe is but one among them, which is the meaning behind the infinite layers of the abyss. Isn't this something already proven by scientists? There should be an infinite number of universes due to different dimensions, the difference in passage of time or the difference in planar coordinates. How is it worth being surprising and telling us about? If they were just telling us this normally, it indeed wouldn't be a problem. But if they start off with telling us the rules of Dungeons and Dragons, and are using this as a metaphor, what they're trying to tell us is clear. Our world's laws are just like that of Dungeons and Dragons. Our world, the infinite real worlds and various planes are all fake. Xian said assuredly, they want to tell us that we're just a bunch of living things living in a fabricated simulation. Those countless worlds and universes are but a box. What existences lies outside the box is unknown. They, no, it. Those are the true enemies of saints and cultivators. Zheng was in a daze, and finally understood what Xian was saying after a long time. He immediately pondered on it, and after another long while he finally said, if so, no wonder they lost. The creators who could build our infinite universes and space simply isn't something they can resist. Then what is the meaning behind building God's realm? Could it be that they want us to follow them in resisting those creators? It's not necessarily true that the creators are stronger than us. Accurately speaking, the things that are under consideration are different since the dimension resided in is different. Let me make an example. You've played internet games before, right? Find any internet game. For example, for one with cultivators as the theme, you'll get stronger as your rank increases. Calling the wind and summoning the rain, as well as moving mountains and filling seas would be common. If you could arbitrarily modify the game even more, then you could kill hundreds of bosses with one punch, or be even stronger. As long as it adheres to the game's rules, you could modify the character to the peak. Then, with that powerful character as the blueprint, what do you think will happen if that organism enters our real world and keeps his power? The end result was self-evident. The human world would definitely take heavy casualties if even nuclear weapons couldn't destroy this organism. Humanity could very likely become extinct, or if this organism became an unparalleled existence, all of humanity could possibly become slaves. Or, society could be radically changed, and become the societal order this organism wanted, etc., etc. In short, this would be a disaster to humanity. Understand? The laws are different, and strong has different definitions. As we are in a box, everything outside the box may possibly exceed our imagination. For example, one-dimensional creatures cannot understand the so-called various sides of two dimensions. Two-dimensional creatures are unable to understand the height in our dimension. Perhaps we are characters in a novel. Everything about us has long since been in his mind, and our infinite universes progresses along with him writing out his imagination. When a character transcends his novel, he would create even stronger existences, or use some methods we aren't able to understand to deal with him, with the prerequisite that the box can't be destroyed. We're characters in a novel? Could someone be writing about us and our world? Zheng found it strange hearing this, and hurriedly asked. Xian shook his head. This is only a single possible hypothesis. If the character in the internet game isn't controlled by anyone and has artificial intelligence, they wouldn't know what the so-called internet is, or that their world is merely some data. Similarly, us in our world, or the box we reside in, don't know what lies outside the box, what created this box, where we'll go if we escape. All this is unknown. Zheng had unlocked the third stage at this moment, and simulated Hunglo's thought processes. After thinking for quite a while, he said, I roughly understand what you mean. With the internet game as an example, if an NPC transcends the game and can roam freely in the internet, it's a huge threat even if they can't appear in the real world. Like in Terminator, computers were controlled, and nuclear missiles were fired which caused the Earth to be destroyed. The saints and cultivators at that time reached this realm. No wonder the box creators couldn't tolerate them. This is roughly what they want to tell us, right? Xian was, however, slowly starting to frown. He whispered softly for a long while before suddenly saying, there should still be one piece of information, although it sounds outrageous. Zheng, take a spin over there and see if there are any living things. Zheng felt strange in his heart, but he still operated the sky stick to fly around randomly after hearing that. After flying for a short while, he still hadn't met any living things. The world was still a field of dark red, and he immediately said to Xian, what living things? It's very spacious and empty here. Then I'm indeed wrong for this hypothesis. I just find it strange. Why wouldn't they directly leave a message, but instead use a metaphor to make us guess? If my hypothesis is correct, then there should be activity on your end, Xian murmured to himself, baffled. Wait. I see it. A lot of monsters suddenly appeared from the ground. Zheng was originally waiting to reply to Xian, but before his words could come out, he could see ground below shift gradually. Then, countless reptile-like creatures, merely 20 to 30 meters in size, appeared. They looked like ordinary reptiles, all with different shapes. But, their numbers were simply too many, and a field of densely packed red reptiles were beneath him, a scale of over 100 million. Just as Zheng shouted out, the reptiles suddenly started biting at each other, and a chaotic battle immediately broke out. Yes. This is what they've been trying to tell us. No wonder they couldn't directly leave a message to us. So that's why they had to tell us this before the final battle.